I'm recording this video on February 20th, 2023, where Daniel Jones has just actually changed his agents and dropped his last agents, moved on to a new agency, as he thinks that his last agents were going a little bit too low on what his value is for the Giants. For the Giants, I think we're putting him in that $35 million range per year. And Danny Dimes is looking for something in the $42 to $45 million range, which is very interesting to see. Because with saying that, I want to take us back to August of 2022 when things were much differently. Daniel Jones going into the 2022 season had come off a string of mediocre seasons for the most part, right? In 2019, he had 24 passing touchdowns with a 3-9 record. 2020 was he was a 5-9 record with 11 touchdowns, 10 interceptions. He was also sacked 45 times. A huge year where there was a ton of turnovers from him. It was really tough to watch and had a lot of us Giants fans questioning, was this our guy? Is this someone that we could get behind and could lead this team to, the next step of our franchise rebuild? 2021, he has a 4-7 record as a starter, 10 touchdowns to 7 interceptions. And then this brings where he was hurt a couple of games, and the Giants kind of just sucked overall anyway as Joe Judge got canned. Moving into the 2022 season, where we had a new coach, new GM, and with Brian Daboll and Joe Schoen, none of these guys had drafted Danny Dimes. And when you have a new coach and new GM come in on the same schedule, which is great, I'm so glad that the Giants did that going into the season because you did see it pay dividends. But I think something to keep in mind with that is Daniel Jones, Vanilla Vic, Danny Dimes was not the guy that they drafted. He is from the last GM and coaching era, right? So having said that, that put a lot of pressure on Daniel Jones to succeed because if he did not play well to start this season, they would have went with a more probably bridge quarterback or someone like, and I think that's why they originally brought in Tyrod Taylor, and there were the reports that Brian Dable was giving Daniel Jones in the preseason camp harder plays against a defense that kind of knew what was scripted, right? And gave all of the easier plays to Tyrod Taylor. Maybe this is a twofold approach, right? It could have easily broken Danny Dimes as he thought maybe he wasn't being treated fairly and that they wanted him out. Or on the flip side of things, it got from a coaching perspective the best out of Daniel Jones at a pretty early indicator for how the season would go for him, that he would have to overcome adversity and have to take that next step forward because for Daniel Jones going into the season, that next step forward was never guaranteed. So as the season wrapped up, Danny Dimes did play in 16 out of 17 games. The only game that he did not play in was that Eagles game at the end of the year where our boy Davis Webb, Senior Bowl MVP, who the Giants drafted, feels like so long ago now. Yeah, Davis Webb came in and almost actually beat the Eagles in that game. But again, just to get started on Daniel Jones and talk about that, he has completely exceeded his expectations, and I think he proved a lot of people wrong. I do love on the Giants Reddit, the Daniel Jones apology meme. It's absolutely classic, and I think that holds true to a lot of us Giants fans who maybe didn't want to see him succeed, or even he's signed long term to even come back. I mean, I do think the most interesting thing with Daniel Jones is when you think about the way the media treats these NFL athletes. Because the media creates a certain narrative. And going into that 2019 draft, there was no narrative that Daniel Jones would be, a top draft pick, let alone go to the New York Giants at 6 overall. Also, your boy Average Bob didn't even like the pick at the time either because I think I fell under the media narrative that this was a guy from Duke who wasn't supposed to be good in the NFL, even though he is 6'5", 230 pounds and can run really quick, right? I just didn't want to hear it because I hadn't heard of too many good players from Duke, right? So here's what happened: the Giants make that pick. Everyone in the media immediately bashes the pick. Why didn't they take Haskins? Why didn't they take blah, 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 right? So the media, instead of saying, and this is the problem with the media, right? The media cannot admit that they were wrong and didn't have this on their board. And they're all experts who are being paid a lot of money to tell you exactly what's going to happen in the top 10 picks of the NFL draft. This one was one that I got massively wrong. No one had it. So instead of admitting that they were wrong, that's not ever the media's narrative, whether it's sports or politics or anything, right? So what they do is they say, wow, we're going to bash the Giants for this pick. And then as the season goes on, you have your sophomore year where he has all those fumbles and interceptions. That becomes media confirmation bias, where they leverage confirmation bias to say, this was what we thought was going to happen. This guy sucks. He played at Duke. He can't play quarterback. So the media really never wanted to give him a chance from the start, at least on the national spotlight, until this previous season, where you did see a lot of media folks apologizing for how wrong they were about Danny Dimes. Stephen A. is out there doing crazy stuff, and he was always funny to watch this season in particular, about how wrong he was. And I think at this juncture, we are at a crazy place in time where Danny Dimes is going to get paid, and he's going to get paid a lot of money. And, I think regardless of what happens, whether it's a good deal or if it's a bad deal, people will still point and laugh and say, ha ha ha, why'd you do that? But regardless of what Joe Schoen chooses to do here, I will be happy with it, because this is kind of, he's married to this, right? If this doesn't work out, he's done too. And he doesn't want to get canned and, be blackballed in the industry and just, set the Giants back. Like, I think everyone's so sick of that. And him and Dave will have a great start. So they're going to do what they think is best for themselves to win football games. And having said that, it's just having also money to build out a team the way that they need to. So I'm really confident in trusting whatever they want to do to that extent. Danny Dimes will be 26 years old the next time the season comes around. So I think that's perfectly fine to pay a guy, maybe like a 3 to 4 year deal and see how it works out. Obviously, here's one other thing to keep in mind as well. If you pay a quarterback top dollar, it doesn't really kill you as much as it would be to pay a running back. So I'll touch on that when we touch on the running back core. And I think one great example of this is if you look at the Eagles. Before the Eagles drafted Jalen Hurts, they had paid Carson Wentz to a pretty substantial, massive contract that, they were thought that they were tied to, right? Look at Russell Wilson. And what happened with that was they get Jalen Hurts, they start playing him, he looks good because Wentz is out, and they trade Wentz to a quarterback needy team like the Colts, or another example could be the Broncos that are always looking for a quarterback. Teams will do it. So my point is, even if you pay Daniel Jones and he doesn't turn out to be the guy that he was as successful in this season and keep trending in the right direction, it's not going to be the end of the world. I'll tell you that. When it does become the end of the world is when you start paying position players that don't step on a field or ever play. When you draft guys who don't play, like Kenny Galladay, Kadarius Toney. Take a couple years back, look at Nate Solder. He was a net negative. You made him the highest paid tackle in the league, and he played about a season and a half. He couldn't. And I think what's different at quarterback is someone will always take on that contract. Someone else will, and if it doesn't work, someone else will be waiting in the weeds to come along and get a good opportunity. And that's why you have Joe Schoen to be able to find those diamonds in the rough in case they do develop, and they are out there. Similar like what Howie Roseman did for the Eagles, right? Jalen Hurts, obviously he's a fucking great quarterback, and you get drafted to the second round. So you don't have to overdraft these guys like Kenny Pickett and all these other losers that come up in the draft every year that are like, they're not that good anyway. So you have to pay up for a quarterback now. Is it the answer long term? That's yet to be seen. But regardless, I'm happy where we're at right now. And I think Daniel Jones deserves to get paid whatever the Giants are willing to do within a certain degree of. I think I kind of went off the rails in this one a little bit from what I was going to do from a review perspective and talking about the season in general. But yeah, no, I, again, absolutely love that Daniel Jones was kind of had a back against the wall approach. Like, this is kind of it for me. If I don't do well, or, when a new coach comes in, Daniel Jones, if he went 1-3 or looked bad in those first few games, they probably would have went to Tyrod Taylor pretty early in the season. And I don't think Brian Dable would have batted an eye, but I think as the season went on, they did develop a great relationship with one another where you saw how happy Dable was to be like, oh, great throw, boy, like all that shit. Like, this is coaching bringing out the best in their players. I think you saw it across the board from Brian Dable and that impact that he had across the entire locker room and getting the most out of all of his players. And I think that will only continue to grow because we fostered a new culture. And I think that's going to continue to grow. And I think one of the first things we have to do to solidify that is bring back Daniel Jones on a long-term deal. Sorry about that. Had someone knock on the door, which threw off the whole flow of the ending of the video. But my point is we are going to bring back Daniel Jones. Seeing how the situation goes from a contract perspective with his new agents and what they're going to be aggressive and pushing for. But regardless, I am totally fine with him coming back. And I trust Brian Dable and Joe Schoen to do the right financial side of things for all parties involved, where we can still build a team and grow season over season towards a future of winning the Super Bowl. Anyway, thank you guys for watching. Really appreciate it. And stay tuned for the next videos that are coming up in the series.